Here in New Zealand we have the advantage of our clean green image, some of the top genetics in the world and the cheapest way possible of creating production. But as the world drives onwards looking for better production and producers fight low returns, that may not be enough. The solution may well be this: farmer's yeast. Simply by adding this yeast, you modify bacterial activity within the rumen, which in turn helps digestion.
And the response in general is about 1.5 to as high as 3 kilograms of milk increase per day when you put yeast and enzymes in the rumen.
It's used by about 70% of the concentrate-fed herds in the United States. But until now, there hasn't been a commercial version produced here. Early indications show the product does have a place within our systems. Dean Geddes lifted production by 1.5 litres per cow per day. Dean didn't use a control herd, but says nothing else was changed, so he's convinced it must have been the yeast.
They'd had the same diet, and through that time of the year I thought it was a good time to try it, because, you know, different paddocks, different grasses, the cows are up and down, but yeah, they were on the same diet.
There are 3 main methods of administering the yeast: as an additive to meals, mixed with bloat prevention drench, or added to the herd's water supply. To accommodate that, the yeast comes in 2 forms, either as a soluble concentrate or as a dry additive. Either method costs 13 cents a day per cow. Whilst in the States the daily dose is, in some cases, lifting returns by about $5 per every dollar spent, that figure is expected to be about $3 return here in New Zealand because of our different operation.
We feed grass here, and the rumen has to digest that much more food, a lot more volume, compared to grains and silages.
Other benefits apart from extra milk production is improved milk quality. The somatic cell counts may drop dramatically, plus production efficiency improves. Farmer's yeast, putting the rumen right so it can work to its potential naturally. For further information, ring 0800 4 yeast.
And back to basics is proving a popular, successful policy for one Canterbury dairy farmer. In a bid to boost milk production, he's trialling a product that's been around for centuries. Jenny Harper has more.
Live yeast, used for making bread, making beer, and now for making more milk. These cows have been fed live yeast for 2 months, and milk production continues to rise.
I had an increase of about 1 litre to a litre and a half a day through the winter.
That's per cow. For Dean Geddes, an extra 200 litres a day, the yeast simply added to the herd's winter feed. Live yeast is commonplace in farms throughout Europe and the United States, but is only now being produced in this country, making it more cost-effective, more attractive to Kiwi farmers, according to an American expert.
It helps break down the fiber in the grass that you're looking at here and makes it more available to the cow so the cow can derive more energy from the feed she eats.
It's the purity of the product that appeals to experts and farmers alike. Dr. Anderson says not only is milk production sure to rise, but animal health will improve. Another Canterbury farmer trialling the yeast reports a 50% drop in the somatic cell count, a good indication of a happy herd. And there's another spin-off too. There are no flies around this heap. It seems they just don't like the brew. Jendy Harper, One Network News.
Hi, I'm Dr. Harry Anderson. I'm a PhD nutritionist. I do consulting work in the United States. I live in central Kansas and work throughout the United States, and I have for the last 25 years done work with feedlots, dairies, range cattle, and other species. I have always maintained an interest in improving digestion of feedstuffs by animals through natural methods. By doing this and being interested in this over the last years, it has brought me to the use of microbials, being bacteria, yeast, and molds, for the use of increasing the efficiency of digestion by animals. This has been a real interesting area, and it has captivated my attention to the point where I have come to Australia to work with direct-fed biosystems in a product they call farmer's yeast, and I do the consulting work for them to answer questions for producers like you, but also to help them refine their products and make sure that they have the most efficient way of getting yeast and bacteria and enzymes to your animals that is possible. So this morning, what I would like to share with you is some thoughts about, first of all, how the ruminant animal digests feed. Secondly, how basic digestion is affected by different things, especially yeast and bacteria. And then talk a little bit about what effects we can expect to see in animals, especially dairy cows, because that is one of the most easily seen responses, and what the economics would be if you fed it to your animals and realized a response or an improvement in milk production. So to start with, I would like to share a few thoughts about some basic rumen physiology and digestion. This is not going to be an extensive explanation because that would take too much time, but I would like to share a few thoughts about the system itself. We have 5 components to the ruminant digestive system. We first have the rumen, this number 1, which is a large fermentation vat, and in some dairy cows can hold anywhere from 40 liters to as high as 80 or 90 liters of material. And it's a continuous fermentation system, which is kind of important to understand because it's different than making beer or fermenting cheese or yogurt or something like that. And they are batch systems where they go to an end point and then they stop fermentation and start over. This system is designed to be a continuous flow so that we constantly have material or foodstuffs going into the rumen, being digested by bacteria, which is the main digestion process in the rumen, and from this we get nutrients to the animal that are very critical for their well-being and production. Within this ruminant system then, the production is created by these bacteria, and the bacteria, which are the main workforce in the ruminant animal, come in various sizes and shapes. They might be small sphericals, they might be rod-shaped, they might be spheres in chains like this, but nonetheless, they all have the same function. They secrete enzymes to digest feedstuffs. Now, bacteria appear in the rumen in the literally trillions of numbers, and they are by far the most common, and there are over 300 species of bacteria that exist in this rumen at any given time. Then we also have the larger particles by relationship here. We have protozoa. Protozoa are very important in that they are a food source and they work with the bacteria in breaking down protein sources and also some of the carbohydrate sources. The other function we have in here would be yeasts, which are in various shapes. Yeasts are actually molds that grow. So you can term these yeasts or molds, and they are present in the rumen to also help break down feedstuffs into various nutrients. Now, once we ferment the feed in the rumen for anywhere from 18 to as high as 72 hours, sometimes certain feedstuffs will stay in this fermentation vat before it's fermented fine enough to be transported into the next stomach, which is the reticulum. The reticulum is an organ that is very interesting because this is where the metal, if you have a hardware problem or anything, will get collected in the reticulum, and this is called the hardware stomachs because it will collect any hardware before it gets into the lower digestive tract, and oftentimes it will stay here and not cause any trouble, or sometimes when you have hardware disease, this will poke through the wall of this and cause an infection in the body cavity, and that's why we have hardware disease. That's a side piece of information. Now, once the feedstuffs goes in here and water is squeezed back into the rumen, the foodstuffs then moves into what we call the omasum, which is also called the many-ply stomach. Within this system, there are folds of skin that protrude off the wall of this organ, and the feedstuffs must move through this system and the water is squeezed from it, and it also serves as a grinder to grind the particle size very small. And this is where the last part of the fermentation takes place before the feedstuff is then moved into the true stomach, or abomasum is the real stomach, and that is the stomach that is the same as a human being or a rat or a pig or any simple stomached animal. And now we change from a fermentation type system to a straight enzyme system. We start to mix this with acid, and as the food moves through into the small intestine, we begin to mix it with enzymes. And this is where the food is finally broken down, the last part of it, and is absorbed into the bloodstream and used as nutrients. Now, the function of the ruminant animal is that we want to utilize fermentation and absorption from the entire system. So what we want is to have digestion taking place at every key point along the way. And there are some real inefficiencies that take place if one part of the system is overloaded and the other one doesn't have enough work to do, and that's part of the reason we use yeast, bacteria, and enzymes when we want to make this unit more efficient. So that is the basic way we do this, and what we are trying to share with you is not an education on how the system works, but we do need to understand a little bit of this if we're going to know how yeast does work in the rumen.
Yes, Dr. Harry, would you explain the process of feed digestion in terms that I can understand?
Oh, that's a very good question, Donna. And a lot of people think that digestion is a very complex thing, but really it has some real simple, basic things that we can talk about. The most basic part of digestion is that all feedstuffs are digested by the use of enzymes. If I may show you an illustration and use this as a particle of feed, say this is a piece of hay or grass that the animal has consumed. The only way this is going to become digested is if there are enzymes that are produced to digest that. So the basic thing is enzymes are going to digest the feed. When we look at a piece of hay, grass, or grain, or any foodstuffs that the animal is going to eat, they're all made from the same thing, and that is carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are made of sugar units. Like glucose is the most common sugar unit used in the starches and fibers of the foodstuffs the animal is going to eat. These carbohydrates must be digested by enzymes to get energy for the animal. Now, the enzymes are not made from nature as much as from the feedstuff itself as they are from the bacteria that I talked about earlier. Bacteria produce the enzymes that digest the feed. So whatever we do to enhance the bacterial population or activity, we increase the enzyme level, which increases the rate at which feed is digested. If we want to increase the bacterial population, we can increase that by using yeast, and this is where yeast comes in. Yeast encourage bacterial growth, which increases enzymes, which increases the digestion rate. We can also feed bacteria by other methods. We know today that we can use sodium formate as a nutrient for bacteria and make them grow faster. We know that we can use certain types of calcium that is charged with a negative charge and increase bacterial activity that increases enzymes. So whatever we do, enzymes is the basic way it's digested. Enzymes have the ability to break units of this feedstuff apart and turn it into nutrients that the animal can use. And if I may show you another illustration of how this takes place, then I think you'll understand how important it is to feed the bacteria through the use of farmer's yeast, and that's where the effect comes in. What we do is we have these units of glucose that are liberated from starch or fiber. And these units of glucose all have 6 carbon units. They are composed of carbon units with hydrogens attached to them. If you know any of biochemistry, this is an interesting thing because they all have the same. Now these 6 carbon units are going to be turned into what we call volatile fatty acids. Volatile fatty acids are simply small organic compounds that create energy in the animal's body once they're absorbed into the bloodstream. They turn into fat, they turn into parts of the protein molecule, they are converted into energy by the cells for milk production, growth, etc. So what the VFAs are the thing that we are trying to get to. How this works is, if we take this 6 carbon sugar and break it into pieces, we can turn it into acetic, which is a 2 carbon unit, propionic, which is a 3 carbon unit, or butyric. These are the main volatile fatty acids that are created from bacterial activity. Once these are liberated, they are taken into the bloodstream and used as energy. Now when we make acetic acid, we lose some efficiency because we lose 2 carbon units. We can make 2 of these, and we have methane and carbon dioxide, which are waste gases that are given off. If we make propionic acid, we can make 2 molecules of this propionic acid, and this is the most efficient one, and this is where bacteria come into play. Many bacteria will direct the fermentation toward the propionic acid and make it very efficient. Butyric acid is a very minor one. These are the 2 that we are most interested in. Now this is how we get energy into the animal for meat and milk production. If we can alter this through manipulation of the microbial activity in the rumen, we can make the rumen more or less efficient. And that is what our purpose is in feeding enzymes, bacteria, and yeasts, because we can alter this and turn this into a more efficient system by creating more enzymes through bacteria and yeast use. Okay, Paul, do you have a question?
Yes, Dr. Harry Anderson. I understand how yeast improves digestion now, but what does it do for milk production?
That's a very good question. The response in milk production is not always the same from one herd to the next or one research project to the next, but there have been many, many research projects done around the world over the last 15 to 20 years concerning just this, feeding yeast and or enzymes to dairy cattle. And the response is general, is about 1.5 to as high as 3 kilograms of milk increase per day when you put yeast and enzymes in the rumen. So this is quite a nice response. In most areas of the world where the milk is sold under similar conditions as far as volume plus bonuses or reductions for fat test and protein, this works very nicely. But to show you just a little bit about what the responses are numerically, and I think this is part of what you're asking about, I can show you a little bit of the range. I have in my hand a summary of 4 different university trials, including the University of Wisconsin, which is have done numerous trials along this line, Rutgers University, Utah State, and the University of Delaware, all in the United States. The average response in these trials would be approximately 2 liters of milk increase per day. But you don't always want to stop and look at just the amount of milk produced, because sometimes there are variables within studies that will indicate that just milk increase is not the final figure. The way I like to look at it is the amount of milk that is produced per unit of dry feed that goes in to an animal. And also I like to look at it in terms of how much milk is produced per unit of live weight, because we have different size cows and they produce different volumes of milk. And if you can take a smaller cow and increase her milk production, you have a dramatic increase in production efficiency. To illustrate this point, I have taken the summaries from 4 recent trials that have been conducted in the United States at the University of Wisconsin, at Rutgers University, Utah State University, and University of Delaware. Here I have the numbers of kilograms of milk produced by those cows that did not receive yeast and those that did receive yeast in their diet. The production response in terms of just kilograms of milk, or liters of milk if you will, was only a 1.5% response in milk production at the University of Wisconsin. But if you look at the amount of milk produced per unit of dry matter consumed by the cow, you have a plus 4% response. And I think this is the important figure, not just the milk production, but how efficient is she? How much feed does it take to make that milk? At Rutgers, if you look at just the milk production, it's 3.1%, and if you look at the efficiency, it's 3.8% response. Those were very close together, meaning that both sets of cows were quite efficient, but we did get a better efficiency when we fed the yeast. The one that is one of the more dramatic ones I've seen as far as a discrepancy between milk production increase and efficiency increase is at Utah State University, where the milk production was only at 2.5%, which is fine, and it's a good response, but when you look at the efficiency between the two groups of milk produced per unit of dry matter, it was plus 11.1%. This is the important figure. In this case, the cows consumed less feed to produce more milk, which gave them a tremendous efficiency response. The same thing took place at the University of Delaware. If you just look at the response in milk production of only 0.55%, response in milk production, because it's a very small one, that would give you a false indicator that this is not an economical or an efficient response. But if you look at the response in efficiency, because this group of cows was smaller and they ate less dry matter, they had a response of plus 8.14%. So if you look at the percent response in efficiency, the smallest one we found in these 4 trials was 3.8%, and the largest was 11. That gives us a nice range of efficiency responses and shows you just how much you can improve the efficiency of digestion and energy output in the rumen by using a direct-fed microbial such as farmer's yeast.
Doctor, what concerns me, will I make more money if I feed farmer's yeast?
Keith, that's a very good question, because that's the one that has to be answered before it has any value to any dairyman anywhere in the world. This is not an easy question to answer because the economics wherever I travel are different. You have different ways of buying milk and you have different prices for milk. If I compare just an example of 2 places in the world that I think are quite a ways apart right now, in the United States today we sell milk by the hundredweight, and if we have milk that is 3.5% butterfat, that equates to about $15 per hundredweight, or about 15 cents per pound. If we look at the contrast in the country of New Zealand, for about the same, for the same percentage of butterfat, they will receive about 20 cents per liter, or that is about $9 per hundredweight, compared to the United States at 15. So it's not easy to give you an exact answer for anywhere in the world. What we need to do is look at each individual situation. Let's use the New Zealand example as one that if it works there, if it fits their economics, then it would work most everywhere. The cost of farmer's yeast is approximately 13 cents per day per animal. And if we can increase our milk production, or our income, our milk, I'm sorry, by 2 liters per day, that would give us an income, if we look at it this way, income of 2 liters at 20 cents would be 40 cents per day. And if we take the cost of the yeast minus 13 cents per day, we do get a net of 27 cents. This is a very attractive net income, and if you could get on the higher end of the scale of response, the 3 liter or higher, a 3 liter response would give you an additional 20 cents or 47 cents a day. So it's very hard to say, but the bottom line is, wherever I've traveled, if we can get it the right perspective, the farmer, the dairy farmer, can make very good money. And I think that will apply just about anywhere in the world, depending on the cost of the yeast. So we talked about money, and the 27 or 47 cents is good. But let's talk about efficiency, because sometimes responses can become clouded in the efficiency scenario that we don't always see on the surface of research. For example, if we use the Delaware study, which is the lowest response as far as milk production, in that situation there was only a 0.6 liter response. Now if we get 0.6 liters, that is only 12 cents a day. Now 12 cents a day and you spend 13 cents a day, that doesn't work very well. You can trade money and get a lot of experience, but no dairy farmer needs that. So we have to have something more out of this. But what we found was, when we looked at the efficiency, was that the dairy cow consumed less feed. And if she decreased her feed intake, decreased dry matter intake by 1 kilogram, even though it may be difficult to put an exact cost on a per kilogram dry matter feed, no matter whether you're grazing a cow or whether you're feeding her all in the feed bunk, every kilogram of dry matter has a value. And the cost, for instance, if the cost per unit of kilogram of dry matter is about 15 cents, which would be about right in most areas that I travel today, 15 cents. Now we have to add that 15 cents onto here. So even in that study, we now have an income of 27 cents and a cost of 13. So the net income is smaller than it was before for the average, but it still is a 14 cents per day income. And if you say, for instance, you have 200 cows at 14 cents, that's still $28 a day, which in my estimation is a very significant income increase for any dairy farmer anywhere in the world if he can get that many dollars a day on 200 cows. That should not be overlooked. But if you look just at the production response on that trial, you would miss that economic importance. To follow up with one more thought on the efficiency side, if you look at the Delaware study, where the response was almost nothing as far as milk production, but we had a good response in feed efficiency usage by the animal. If we take that one step further, and we have a given land mass that we are harvesting with dairy cows, and we get a 6% feed intake reduction when we feed the yeast. That's how we figured the response. And that means we can increase our cow numbers on this same land mass by 6%. If we have a 200 cow herd, we can now operate with 212 cows on that same space. And if we have 12 additional cows in the herd at no additional cost, because we have that covered with the increase in efficiency, now we can enjoy the income from those 12 additional cows on a daily basis, and that means, again, more money in your pocket as a dairyman.
Dr. Harry, can I feed this to sheep, horses, or any other species that I might have in production, such as pigs?
Yes, that's a very good question also. The yeast and bacteria and enzymes work in all species of animals. You will see varying results and varying effects of feeding these types of products. But yes, you can feed it to horses. Yeast is used in the horse production a lot. It will enhance the fermentation efficiency of a horse because they have a cecum that will ferment the feed. You can feed it to baby calves. This is one question I often get, is can it go to baby calves before they're a ruminant? Yes, it will. And in fact, it will enhance the fermentation process in their developing rumen, and they can help develop the rumen faster, and you can wean them more quickly and get them on dry feed and off milk at a younger age, which is going to be a cost savings. Pigs, yes, they use this in pigs. Sheep are, it's very good in sheep because they have the same fermentation system as does the dairy cow. Goats, we use it in goats. And any other species that has any kind of fermentation system, we use it. And not only the fermentation system, but like the pigs, if we can enhance the bacterial activity in the digestive tract, they benefit from it because even they have a certain amount of fermentation in the lower intestine. They have bacteria that help digest the feed in the lower intestine and make it more efficient. Poultry is another one that comes to mind. Poultry, worldwide, there's probably more bacteria and yeast fed to poultry on a percentage basis than any other species. They benefit greatly from it because there's fermentation in the crop or the holding compartment of the bird, and when it speeds up the fermentation process and the breakdown of their feedstuffs before it actually goes to the simple stomach. So yes, all of these species, plus many more that I could name, can use yeast very efficiently.
Okay, Dr. Harry, how can I feed farmers yeast? Can I put it in their water?
Yes, Gary, that's a good question. You can apply it in water, but actually you can apply it in many methods, and water is one of the more efficient that a lot of dairymen tell us they want to use, but it can be used in the feed, a dry feed. If you're feeding a dry supplement or a green mix of any kind, you can mix it in that. You can use it in a drench, which is applying it in water, but you can put it in the water system. In cases where you have a consistent water intake and you can predict the water intake each day, you can literally apply it through the water system, and then it will be dosed as they drink water, and this is a very efficient way of doing it. And the viability of these cells of yeast and bacteria and enzymes, the enzymes are very stable in water. Yeast will last probably 48 to 72 hours most of the time in most water conditions. So yes, the application methods are very versatile, and you can apply them just about any method you can think of. It can be used. To summarize, I'd like to share my final thoughts about the use of yeast. Feeding yeast has been around for literally thousands of years. It's one of the oldest technologies in the world. But we now have revisited it through the scientific community to prove some of the things that it does. So now we're looking at it at a different basis. One of the things that you want to look for in yeast is the purity and the number of cells that are alive. Farmer's yeast is 100% viable. It is produced in a very clean environment. It is suitable for use in human foods as well as animal foods by the production system, and it is the one that you want to look for. But the bottom line is, farmers' yeast, when used correctly, can increase the efficiency and the profitability of your livestock unit, regardless of species or location.